There are three ways of explaining the distribution of continents. A contracting Earth. This has no supporters at present. A steady-state Earth with fixed continents and oceans. Very few hold this view. A steady-state Earth with plate motion. Nearly all geologists believe this. Since about 1968, the plate tectonics theory has been the favorite with most geologists to explain the movement of continents. It seems that the theory can satisfactorily explain many major questions in geology. But there have always been doubters. One such man is Professor Sam Carey, who supports the theory of an expanding Earth. Professor Carey was head of the geology department at the University of Tasmania for 30 years. He was also visiting professor at many universities, including Yale and Western Ontario. In 1956, he sponsored the highly successful Continental Drift Symposium at the University of Tasmania. This symposium helped stimulate interest in continental drift after decades of neglect or even contempt by the majority of geologists. He believed then, as now, that continents moved as a response to expansions of the Earth. But did he always believe that the Earth has expanded?
No, only during the last quarter of a century. During the 30s and 40s and 50s, I taught what you now call plate tectonics. I took for granted that the Earth's diameter was constant. It hadn't occurred to me anything else. But if I'd only known it, in Germany, Lindemann had published his book on the expanding Earth in 1928, and Hilgenberg in 1932, and Kindle in 1940. But these weren't translated into English. They weren't translated until I translated them 20 years ago. But as I worked, I got increasing difficulty in putting the pieces together on a bigger and bigger area. You must remember that I was working more accurately than my contemporaries. I calculated hundreds of oblique stereographic projections, all by logarithms. There were no computers in those days. And I made comparisons on my hemispherical table. No matter how often I tried, I could never get all the continents to go together on the whole globe. Even with these, which fit so nicely, there's still a small gap there. But as I put more and more pieces on, the gaps accumulated, and I've got a very large gap. I didn't realize that my trouble was that my table matched my globe, and not a smaller globe, which was the proper globe for that time. As difficulties increased, I gradually became convinced that the plate tectonic model, which fits so well for these two continents, won't work for the whole globe. Then there's the problem of the Pacific Ocean. When you put all the continents together on Pangaea, Pangaea spills over a hemisphere. Here is Wegener's 1915 version of it. 70 years ago, Wegener pioneered continental drift, and the translation of his book from German in 1924 burst like a bomb among astonished English-speaking geologists. Wegener's map is an Eitoft projection of the whole globe, as though you cut the globe along the back and pulled the sides out and flattened it. Flattening, of course, pulls things out of shape. And this line is, in fact, the correct hemisphere on this projection. You can see that Wegener's Pangaea spills over the hemisphere just a little. Here is my version of it from 1945, 30 years after Wegener, drawn on a stereographic projection which shows only one hemisphere. Here again, Pangaea is just a little more than a hemisphere. And here, another 25 years later, is the 1970 version by the Americans, Bob Dietz and John Holden, using a similar projection to Wegener's and plotted by computer. Again, you see that Pangaea is just a little more than the hemisphere. So everybody agrees that Pangaea was just a little bit more than the hemisphere. Therefore, the Pacific, which was on the other side, was just a little bit less than a hemisphere. Everybody that has put the continents together on a globe of the present size finds that Pangaea has spilled over a hemisphere just a bit. That means that the ancestor of the Pacific on the other side of the globe must have been just a little bit less than a hemisphere. But since then, Pangaea has greatly increased in size by the opening of the Arctic, and opening of the Atlantic, and the Indian Ocean and Southern Ocean, so that what was Pangaea is now nearly doubled in size. That means that the Pacific should have been reduced nearly to zero. But the Pacific is still nearly a hemisphere. Now, that's absurd unless the Earth's greatly expanding. Now, on Pangaea, this point was close up to that point. So that this part of the Pacific Rim has increased by over 1,000 kilometers. Likewise, Antarctica was nudging Madagascar on Pangaea. That means that that part of the Pacific Rim has increased by a couple of thousand kilometers. Likewise, Australia was right up against Antarctica, and the ocean between has opened by 3,000 kilometers.